Have you ever been told to expect the unexpected? Planning and practicing for unthinkable events is more critical than ever. How will your company react if involved in a catastrophic accident with the news cameras rolling? What will your driver say? What will the public think? With technology linking the world in seconds, there is no longer a margin for error. Hi, I'm Todd Carrier with Protective Insurance Company. In this edition of Safety Solutions, we'll review best practices for crisis management and emergency planning in the transportation industry. Let's begin with a definition. An emergency or crisis is a situation that has reached a critical phase in which immediate decisions introduce the possibility of a highly undesirable outcome. The accident that leads to the emergency or crisis is often described as unexpected. However, according to the National Safety Council, managing safety starts from the premise that most accidents can be prevented. Accidents are not random, but rather a sequence of events that can be prevented with proper management commitment, evaluation and controls, ongoing planning, monitoring, and training. So where to begin? In simple terms, there are 4 basic steps in crisis planning. Establish a planning team, analyze capabilities and hazards, develop the plan, and then implement, practice, and refine. Starting with establishing a planning team, you should consider selecting individuals in key roles throughout your organization. For example, a representative each from operations, maintenance, safety, dispatch, sales, and IT. You want accurate representatives from all aspects of the company, but keep the committee size manageable to no more than 10 people. Then define roles and responsibilities for each person on the committee. Document the areas they represent and the time commitment expected, both in the planning process and execution during a crisis. Further develop the committee by establishing authority and issuing a mission statement. Don't forget to appoint a team chairperson or crisis coordinator. This person will be the primary decision maker and public relations speaker. Let's take a moment with Jim Parham of Hirons & Company to delve deeper into the importance of public relations in your crisis management plan. Jim, one of your drivers is involved in a high-profile crash. Your operations manager busts into your office and says it's being captured live by the media. What do you do?
Well, first off, you need to correctly assess the situation. How serious is it, and how quick are things moving? That's very important. 2 is, obviously, you need to contact the authorities and get a communication link established there. And finally, you need to have a communications team appointed quickly to have a smooth flow of information among all parties.
And there's not always a lot of time. These things happen very quickly and they're fluid. So what do you recommend that people do to prepare for that phone call or that news that it's time to react now?
The best thing you can do in these situations is plan ahead. The Boy Scouts have a motto, be prepared, and in this case, preparation is key. You're not going to be able to identify in advance every particular element of a crisis. But what you can do is plan for worst case scenarios and take your planning and implement that immediately, particularly as it relates to the public relations aspects of this case.
So communication is key, and it's much more than simply a call tree.
That's right. A phone tree is essential in any event. However, what we look at is the concentric circle model. You need to contact the people most important up front, and then it moves out gradually to those least important. But don't forget the media. They're always going to be involved in that process. And they're critically important to keep informed, whether it's just being able to say, we'll be back with you in a bit once we have more information, but you can't let them go because the rumor mill starts and then you lose control of the situation.
People always talk about having a toolbox ready. What would you recommend for having something ready for crisis planning?
Well, yes, there's plenty of planning that can be done, and it will really prove useful on the day of the event. So we look at sometimes putting together a press kit. Press kit may involve company history, biographical sketches of those in charge, company safety record if appropriate, as well as materials such as possible digital photographs, other things that will represent the company in the best way possible.
Do you recommend that companies have pre-written statements available?
I think it's really good to look at developing some statements prior to any situation. While they'll have to be adapted quickly, it's good to know in advance what you want to say, and it's been vetted by those in charge.
Do you recommend that legal counsel review this press kit?
I believe that legal counsel should always be involved in review of any external materials, especially in a crisis situation. It pays big dividends to have them involved early and often.
So one of the things you're recommending is to make sure that you don't provide too much information. Is that correct?
Right. A lot of people think you're going to be providing reams of information at the onset of a crisis. Surprisingly, those of us in communications believe the best thing to do is have less. Less is more. The less information that's out there, the less chance you have of making a mistake or needing to retract that information in the future.
Jim, in the communication plan, how do you recommend folks address social media?
Social media is a major development in public relations as it relates to crises. Today, it's 24/7 news cycle, citizen journalists snapping a cell phone video on the side of the road at a crash site. We have to deal with that. But it's very difficult because we lose control when the social media sites are posting whatever people find. So if it's a YouTube video or a Twitter feed, the fact is that we have to deal with that. The best thing to do is monitor social media constantly and provide responses that have been legally vetted at the appropriate time. But I urge you not to get into an online battle with those providing social media content. It's a losing proposition.
Companies often say, what's the worst thing that can happen to us? But that might be a 1 in 10 or a 1 in 25 year event. So to prioritize their efforts, where do you believe they should begin with? The types of scenarios that happen more frequently, like backing incidents or maybe a pedestrian hazard?
Well, obviously there are a variety of things that can happen, and we can't possibly diagram all of those. But the best thing to do is look, what are the most common instances that we encounter on a regular basis? And then build a plan around those.
Most of what we're talking about here is for executive management in the planning process. What role do employees play?
Well, the employee may turn out to be the weakest link in the situation. They're the farthest removed from the management scenario. They're also the person on the ground. We'd prefer that they have adequate training and communications to know what to do first. It's likely the first thing they do is to pick up the phone and call you and avoid talking to the media.
And you don't necessarily want the employee to refuse talking. You want to make sure that they're cooperative, but they say that all information must flow through the designated communication coordinator.
The best thing we can do is that person on the ground to say, it's not appropriate for me to comment at this time, but I will give you contact information for my management.
I'm getting ready to put this team together, Jim. I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you who's going to be on the team. But anything else I need to know about the scope of what I'm about to start?
Well, I think the most important thing is we need accurate information. And you need to make sure within your organization that you have people you can depend on to provide you accurate and clear information in an incredibly quick time frame. You're only as good as the information you have, and the information is power.
Jim, thank you very much for your time today.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Let's move into the second step in crisis planning, which is to analyze capabilities and hazards. Begin by collecting all relevant policies, procedures, and documents that might exist. This includes all facets of the company, from executives to operations, drivers, and support staff. Pay particular attention to gathering as much detail as possible on incident reporting and emergency procedures, such as a call tree, first responders, and investigation steps. Once you've collected this information, perform a vulnerability analysis. A vulnerability analysis can be a detailed assessment tool or a simple spreadsheet that lists scenarios with an assigned probability of occurrence and severity of impact. List everything you can think of that could go wrong, from natural weather disasters to worker injury, motor vehicle crashes, workplace violence, terrorism, or even utility and technology failures. Next, try to identify your critical processes, services, operations, and people. Is there something or someone that, if removed, even just temporarily, would have an immediate and detrimental impact on the business? Quantify both the vulnerabilities and criticalities in relation to time, dollar impact, brand, and reputational risk. Finally, to truly understand the hazards and your capabilities, be sure to meet with outside subject matter experts. This includes state and local emergency authorities, regulatory agencies, insurance specialists, and even safety consultants. Invite them to your planning sessions to ask questions. Share some of your documentation and ask them for feedback. The next step is to actually develop the plan and document the team's work. Start by drafting an executive summary and table of contents. Organize the documents you've collected, such as procedures, contacts, diagrams, and vendor lists, into groups. Some tools that may be helpful in pulling together the information include a mind map or prioritization matrix. Be sure to include specific steps and instructions, perhaps in a flow diagram or decision tree format. Allow ample time for review and approval from each member of the team. Don't wait until the document is near completion. Work one section at a time and pull all the pieces together at the end. This will allow for short breaks in between and the celebration of many individual accomplishments throughout the entire project. As you near completion of the first draft, consider exploring other resources, such as smartphone applications that can help streamline communication and provide real-time access to your critical plan documents. Finally, once the initial plan has been drafted, it's time to implement, practice, and refine. Implementation consists of announcing the existence of the plan, distributing copies, and training both key people and affected individuals. Be sure that everyone in your organization understands their role and has clear instructions on what to do and what not to do. To accomplish this, consider developing a wallet-sized crisis card that contains emergency contact information, first-step instructions, securing the site with law enforcement, and a strict policy against discussing details with emergency responders or the media until designated company officials arrive on scene. And don't forget, the plan is not something that once drafted and implemented sits on the shelf. The plan should be tested on a regular basis with outside organizations, such as law enforcement and fire departments. Furthermore, consider conducting drills or exercises that simulate actual emergencies to work out the details and timing. This allows for continuous improvement and modifications as necessary. The task may seem daunting, but getting started is the hardest part. So begin by establishing a planning team, analyzing capabilities and hazards, developing the plan, and then implement, practice, and refine. This concludes our Safety Solutions video on crisis management and emergency planning in the transportation industry. For more safety and risk management resources, visit our website at protectiveinsurance.com and click on Loss Prevention and Safety Services. And remember, there's always time for safety.